Olá, boa noite.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Um, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Carolina Cordero. I'm a professor at Uninter, and today we have the pleasure to be together for one more global meeting. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about development, business development and entrepreneurship in Saskatchewan and also in Paraná. I'm going to start. Thank you all who are here with us today, who are ready to debate this important topic. I'd like to thank you all my Uninter colleagues who made this event possible, our team, our directors, studio director, marketing, everybody involved in this event. I would like to take the opportunity to let you all know that you can send your questions using the chat box, and at the end we are going to select some of the questions to ask to our speakers. What is important to know today? This roundtable will be led into languages, both Portuguese and English. If you want to hear it in Portuguese, you can connect at Uninter YouTube channel. And if you want to follow us in English, the transmission is through Global Hub YouTube channel. Thank you, the whole Global Hub team who's always helping me and always with me in this adventure. So the idea is to deal with the SDG will compose they have 17 sustainable development goals, and this is a joint effort from countries, companies, NGOs, and the SDG, they try to guarantee human rights to fight poverty, fight injustice, and empower women, act against climate change, and also face some of the greatest challenges that we experience in this world. So we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and business development in Saskatchewan and Paraná. To debate this topic, we have two great guests with us today, very special people, Dr. Bettina Schneider and Dr. Eliseu Barroso. Um, so that you understand, our roundtable will be divided in three different steps. You're going to have Dr. Bettina speech first. Her lecture is going to be in English. Then Dr. Bettina will pass the floor to Dr. Eliseu, who's going to speak Portuguese. And then you're going to have time for Q&A. Questions selected in a chat box, and the answer is going to be both in English and Portuguese. Now, don't worry with your question. If you want to send your question in Portuguese, we are going to translate into English. And if you want to send the question in English, we are going to ask the question in English. So the important thing is send your questions. And right now, uh, ask, I'm going to excuse myself. I'm going to switch to English. And I'm going to call our first guest, Professor Bettina.
Evening. So Bettina, I'm gonna read your resume before we started. Okay, so just for everyone to get to know you a little bit better. So for everyone to understand, Bettina is Associate Dean, Community Research and Graduate Programs and Associate Professor at First Nations University of Canada. Her research interests cover a broad range of issues important to and focus on Indigenous communities. They include community and economic development, financial institutions, business and financial literacy curriculum, social entrepreneurship, and business and public administration. Bettina earned her PhD in Native American Studies and her master's in community development from the University of California, Davis, and she graduated with a bachelor degree in history with honors from New York University. So Bettina, thank you very much for being here with us. It's a pleasure to have you here. And thank you very much for making the effort to talk with us and all the Uninter students in this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here and excited to talk with everyone.
So Bettina, I'm going to start doing this. I have a couple of questions to do to you. And so we could hear from your experience and try to understand a little bit better about this. So we are talking about business and we are talking about entrepreneurship in Saskatchewan, especially, Saskatchewan, Canada, right? So my first question to you is, so nowadays we hear this term entrepreneur and entrepreneurship very often, and we get used to the word, right? But we don't fully understand what that means, what is entrepreneurship, and whether it differs, if there is some kind of difference from places to place. Mm-hmm. So we want to start with basics here. So could you explain what is entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurship has been developed in Saskatchewan?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Carol. So, yeah, entrepreneurship is a loaded word, but I think that there are some really fundamental aspects to entrepreneurship that are common, no matter where you are. I'd say the most common aspects, I would narrow them down to really three common aspects that I think are consistent in any country and culture, and that is one, recognizing an opportunity, right? A market opportunity, and identifying a need, identifying a gap that exists, and an entrepreneur will come in and try to fill that gap, right, through the generation of a business idea, whether that's a product or a service. So I think that is one very common aspect of entrepreneurship. A second one is the collection of and attainment of resources to actually see that business idea come to realization. So the financing piece is critical for any entrepreneur to be able to get their business off the ground and to see their idea come to fruition. The third piece is the actual creation of the business itself, right? And so you have the generation of that business idea, the recognition of the market opportunity, the financing that goes into actually seeing the business come to be, and then the creation. And that creation is a mixing of a number of different ingredients, right? When you're creating a business, you're looking at a number of essential ingredients. And so one is the willingness to take calculated risks, right? To actually put yourself out there. That is a big part of entrepreneurship is risk taking. The ability to actually create an effective team, a team that will help see that business idea to completion, and certainly ensuring that team has the skills to actually build the business and to fill that need that exists in the market. Of course, another key ingredient would be a vision to recognize that opportunity and to continue and persist. And so when I think of an entrepreneur, I think of innovators, people who are determined, persistent. They continue to push for the realization of that business, despite all the hard work and the resources and time that it takes. Because entrepreneurship is, if anything, I've learned over the years, it is a lot of work, and it's always, in the beginning, especially, right, that's where you see the most investment of resources. But it's always worthwhile for most of the entrepreneurs I've met, the work that they put in, but it's certainly, you have to have that persistence, that determination, and certainly that innovation and creativity as well.
Perfect. Now we can understand a little bit better what it is, right? It's taking risks for sure, right? And Bettina, before I ask my next question, I must let you know that we have students from all over Brazil watching us. They're saying, they're giving us the hellos in the chat so we can know where they are from and in which major they are here in Uninter. So now we have almost 600 people watching us online. Yes, that's a lot, right? They're saying hello in the chat. So guys, everyone that is listening, tell us in the chat where are you from and where in Brazil you are here, and if you are an entrepreneur, right? That would be really interesting to know also. And for you guys to know, Bettina was recently in Brazil, just 1 month ago, right? A little bit more than 1 month ago. I was there in Brazil also with Bettina, so she knows Curitiba and Paraná, right?
It was beautiful. It was amazing. I love Brazil. It was an incredible experience. So, Carol, could I say one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
So I didn't fully answer your question because you asked how does it differ, and so I wanted to just say one thing. I think, and this became really clear to me after going to Brazil, right? Because we were exploring entrepreneurship in Brazil in some of the readings we had for our students here, and one of the things that certainly I think helps to differentiate entrepreneurship throughout the world is the resources that entrepreneurs have access to. And I read about all the different places in Brazil and how entrepreneurship actually is quite different depending where you go because of the resources, the cultural differences that might exist. So I think resources, culture, those very much help to differentiate entrepreneurship and really offer unique products and services in different places throughout the world.
Okay, so now I go to my second question. Well, the students are putting there. I think we have students from all of the Brazilian states. That's really amazing, and we already have some good questions. But let's go to my second one. So you have a consolidated career at First Nations University, and you have been part of the business department for a while now. Have you seen good examples of entrepreneur among the First Nations students through this year? And I'm going to put one more question, if I may. So Luciani in the chat, she was asking about First Nations in Canada and how, in your experience, they can become entrepreneur here in Canada, if you could also talk about it. So given the examples and talk about it also.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. So first, I'll just start with the first question. I've seen many successful First Nations entrepreneurs throughout my time here at First Nations University and before. I would say that we have a number of students who graduate from our Indigenous Business and Public Administration program who go on to create businesses. Many of them go on to work for Indigenous organizations. Many of them go on to work for non-Indigenous organizations. I met one student last week who's working for an Indigenous financial institution in Saskatchewan that provides financial resources and business support services to First Nations entrepreneurs. And so there are a number of students who we teach every year who go on to either create their own businesses or certainly help to support a number of Indigenous businesses through the organizations they work for. Some go work for their communities and they'll work for economic development corporations in their communities to help generate business ideas and to create businesses. So we host an Indigenous Youth Entrepreneurship Camp every year, every summer, and we've been doing that since 2009. We're targeting high school students. We have a week-long camp, and they come, and some of those students have gone on to be entrepreneurs. Some of them that have not, and you know, but I think that there's a richness to what they've learned, and they'll learn about entrepreneurship and take some of those ideas with them in their work. Because I think for many of us, while I love entrepreneurship, I've always thought of myself as an intrapreneur instead of an entrepreneur, and that is someone who works within an organization often, or a business, to generate new ideas, products, services. And so I think many of those students that we've taught over the years, while they haven't necessarily all gone on to be, you know, business owners or entrepreneurs, they've taken a lot of those entrepreneurial ideas and they apply them in their different jobs. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. And do you have any examples, like, successful students that you have seen what they did? Just for us to understand a little bit better what's going on around here in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, some examples of, you know, we have some great food restaurants, Indigenous, you know, focused restaurant businesses that have, not necessarily by some of our students, but by people within the community who are connected to the university. They've created some very unique Indigenous cuisine focused businesses. We have we have one person we've worked with for years. He was a student here at University of Saskatchewan, and he created a whole clothing line, niche gear, that's focused on branding that really connects with the Indigenous community here in Saskatchewan and Canada. And he's just been so successful with his clothing line. It's incredible. And he's been so successful, and this is Kendall Netmaker, that he not only has a successful clothing business, but he's also a public speaker now. He goes around the country speaking about entrepreneurship and specifically, you know, his life as an Indigenous, growing up in Saskatchewan in a First Nations community, and donates a lot of his proceeds to Indigenous youth and Indigenous youth in sports. So that's one example, but we have many more I could share. There's lots of really successful entrepreneurs here, First Nations entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs in Canada.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Well, I have more questions to you before, if we have time for more examples, but first, maybe if I may do some other questions. So thinking that, what are the challenges to become an entrepreneur from all that you have read, published, and seen with the students? So what you would say that is the challenges?
Absolutely, thank you. I think that one of the biggest challenges that I've seen over the years, and certainly that I think it's been written about quite a bit, is one, there's often a lack of collateral, and that, you know, that is on reserve. So in Saskatchewan and Canada, there are many First Nations that are, that live on reserve, and the reserve system was created back in the 1800s. It was a product of the Indian Act, and came about after at the time the Indian Act was signed, and that the Indian Act and living on reserve means that if a entrepreneur, a First Nations entrepreneur, wants to take out a loan because they live on reserve, which is a collective space, right? It's shared land between the community. They can't put that, they don't have any collateral in terms of their own homes or land that will help them if they go to take out a loan from the bank. So there's been a challenge with lack of collateral, sometimes a lack of established credit. There's often challenges that come about, structural challenges, socioeconomic challenges due to systemic problems in Canada, and there's also been a lack of local financial institutions, so that's also been another challenge, and that's where we've seen a growth in the last 30 to 40 years of Indigenous financial institutions. They're called Aboriginal financial institutions in Canada right now, and there are many in the United States as well that are specifically targeting First Nations communities and supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs here in Canada to help create businesses, because there was such a historic barrier to financial institutions for Indigenous communities for so many years. We've seen a real growth in recent years of the creation of their own, of Indigenous-owned financial institutions.
Okay, now I do have one last question, and it's actually a challenge for you, if I may. Could you tell us 3 things to do and 3 things to do not to become an entrepreneur?
Okay, absolutely. So I would say the 3 things that you are going to have to do to become an entrepreneur is, at least from my experience, is work incredibly hard. You're going to have to put in an incredible amount of work and time into getting your idea off the ground. I think another piece is immersing yourself in what it is you want to do, learning as much as possible about the industry and the type of business that you want to create. I think the most successful entrepreneurs I've seen out there are people who are often, they've trained for years. And it doesn't mean you can't, some people can jump into a space, a new industry that they're not familiar with, but I think I've seen more entrepreneurs be successful having, background knowledge, experience within the industries that they're working within. And then certainly I think, building a strong network and a strong team, I think, is critical to being a successful entrepreneur. And 3 things not to do. 3 things not to do is, I think, first thing is to try to ask, to try to, let me see how to phrase this. I'd say the first thing not to do would be to think that you can do this off the side of your desk. Some people do start businesses that they start small, right? They do side businesses as they're working a full-time job, and I think that is a very smart thing in the beginning, because you want to test out your idea. You want to see if this is a viable idea. But at some point, if you really want to see the business take off and become a full-time business, you're going to have to dedicate that time and energy. So doing something kind of just on the side, it will, if you want it to be a part-time side business, that's great. But if you really want to see something succeed, you have to, again, put that energy and time in. The second thing I would not do is I would not hand over the business completely to other people to run, right? Sometimes entrepreneurs will take a business idea that they have their specific niche, their specific expertise, but they don't learn other aspects of the business. And you can't learn everything, right? You can't know everything as an entrepreneur. But I think some entrepreneurs have, for example, they don't know the finances, so they let other people manage all the finances, and then they often will have incredible challenges down the road because they haven't been managing or watching their own finances. And so I think it's important to you have to keep your eyes on numerous, you have to juggle many different balls. And so if you just focus in so much into one area, you might lose sight of other areas that are equally important. And so the last thing I would not do is I would not, as an entrepreneur, I would not, financing-wise, I would not dismiss the importance of managing your finances well. And I've seen so many entrepreneurs fail because they do not manage their finances, they do not manage their books And so I always say to my students and the entrepreneur camp students who come in, this is one of the most critical pieces of being an entrepreneur is managing your resources well. So don't lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina. This was really nice. For sure, we learned a lot with you in these only 20 minutes that we have been talking. So thank you very much. We will be back to the questions after Eliseu. So I'm going to ask you to excuse me, but now I'm going to speak in Portuguese. Bom, gente, agora a gente vai para a nossa segunda parte da nossa conversa aqui. Eu tenho o prazer de receber o professor Eliseu.
Very well, we are going to go to the second part of our conversation. Professor Eliseu is a PhD and master by the PhD program at Universidade Positivo. He works in management, society, and organization and change. That's the focus of his studies. He holds a university UNINTER MBA marketing, and he's a professor and the coordinator of our communication, business, and management at UNINTER. He has experience in the administration and is particularly interested in following topics like rationality, solidarity economy, enterprises, language pragmatics, training of graduates in administration, corporate crimes, accountability, compliance, public management, marketing, and innovation in organizations. So, good afternoon, Eliseu. Welcome, and thank you for being here today. And congratulations, it's your birthday today. So you have global meeting as a gift. Good evening, Carol. Good evening, Bettina. It's awesome to be here today. It's a great pleasure to receive this gift in my birthday. It's great to be here today doing what I like the most, and especially talking about entrepreneurship. I was listening to Bettina, and I don't think things are very different around the world when we talk about this topic. Eliseu, I'm going to do what I did for Bettina. I'm going to ask you four questions so that we can advance a little bit and think a little bit more about business and entrepreneurship. First of all, talking to Bettina, we talked about entrepreneurship, especially in First Nations, in Paraná and Saskatchewan. Now, we're going to talk about the scenario in Brazil. I have some questions in the chat. How entrepreneurship has been treated in Brazil, Eliseu? Okay, Carol. I'll do mentorship in the area. And when you talk about entrepreneurship, I think that something is very interesting, which is the entrepreneurship because of the need, their needs. I mean, people lose their jobs and they decide to start a new venture. Sometimes people are fascinated by the romanticism behind it, and we talk a magic formula that João was a mechanic, car mechanic, and started the startup, and now he's making millions. Okay, there are some business conditions. To entrepreneur, because of your need, it's complicated, but in Brazil, that's what happened most of the times, and that's what lead to failure in the first 5 years. People think that they're going to be happy after they are entrepreneurs. We have many people that were on the margin of the law of the society, and this law for micro business are now inside of the formal market. So, and I think it makes people think that it's easy to be an entrepreneur. And some people are saying that it's those who are entrepreneurs, they say that it's difficult, they don't sleep at night, there's no weekend. So you need to persevere, you need to know that it's difficult. There's no magical formula. Thomas Edison made a lot of mistakes until he got to the right light bulb. Mark Zuckerberg, they were playing. That's a good example. Everybody that I know has been dumped in a love relationship. And what did Zuckerberg? They did Facebook. And some of us were drinking warm beer and crying out loud. But there are some very serious institutions that help the entrepreneurs like the Sebrae in Brazil. We have universities like Uninter who sponsor this this type of business. We are committed to make this work, to make the country work. So we talk a lot about that, and I think it's possible if you have a dream, go after this dream. It's not going to be easy. Like, it's not easy to study, but in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, when you have your diploma on the wall, you're going to remember, okay, it was hard when I started studying, but I managed. So same thing for entrepreneurship. So we talk a lot. There are very interesting initiatives like develop
incentivo para quem quer começar, mas assim, falta muito a ideia do como você entender isso na sua realidade. Você tem os manuais prontos, que valem de norte a sul, isso é muito perigoso. Na realidade que nós temos aqui em Curitiba
é diferente. Manuals, pre-made, like some prepared manuals. So it's a different reality. People in Curitiba, I was having a hot dog with no, my point is you need to understand the reality. You need to localize your business. For example, the word that they use for sausage in Curitiba is different than the word in São Paulo. So to have a hot dog, you need to understand. So Steve Jobs believed in his idea, for example. He put together a good team, exactly what Regina said. Each one needs to know their competency. The Superman doesn't exist. Steve Jobs was the idea guy, but us need to be there. So I think that times like this help us to open our minds to what go after and what to look for. Great, Eliseo. Your answer made me think about a different question. Okay, tell me something. Thinking about the Brazilian reality, or consider Brazilian reality. Let's think about the Brazilian reality. But I know that you like it. And do you believe that entrepreneurship, and there's a comment about entrepreneurship, especially in the post-pandemic, had helped in the country economic development. 99% of companies in Brazil are micro or small business. And yeah, SMEs, small and medium-sized business. So we make it happen. We are there every day. We are encouraged to be entrepreneurs. There's a very good example in Curitiba, which is the popcorn guy. Popcorn guy sells popcorn on the street. That's what he does. It's a mainstream product, but he had a great idea. That's how it works. First of all, food on the street is complicated. Is it clean or not? And he had a great idea of having his jacket, a white jacket. It shows it clean, and every day he has a different jacket. So if you go, I mean, it's already late in Brazil, but if you go to the
então você já tem essa percepção. Ele pipoca um troço
for Wednesday.
Assim. Ele criou um kitzinho com guardanapo, com um palito de dente mentalizado.
Things get sticky in your tooth, but he created a kit, like with napkins and a toothpick. So it's a great experience for popcorn. It's awesome. He's selling his popcorn in a square close to a church, close to some schools. So those are the small companies that make the country happen. And I think Brazil is good for small business. For example, we have a duty-free area in Manaus. For example, we have subsidies for soft drinks in Brazil. It's kind of complicated, but what makes this country work, it can say that it's basically small and medium-sized business. Uninter has a partnership with City Hall. We were the last one to keep our students remotely. Our institution is committed to the students in Brazil, specifically here in Curitiba. I work on this sort of project. There was a girl who was, she was selling some sort of sweet stuff, and she was doing well, but the problem was how to deliver. And he couldn't understand the logistics. And she sells using Instagram. So you cannot have it right away. So you write down and you say, okay, this day I'm gonna serve this neighborhood, northwest, and then I realized that I'm spending too much money, especially in fuel, because we have a huge impact in our economy. But the important thing was logistics. So they said, okay, I have my orders, and people like it. They don't say that they like me. How can I do that? You're gonna deliver. You create a QR code. They're gonna open Instagram. They're gonna post. They're gonna tag you. Said, okay, I bought some water. The water was great. And you forget it's just water. So we need to think about small practices and those SMEs that make the economy turn. We have service people who actually make the country engine turn, basically. So you think about the huge companies with the financial impact, but on a day-to-day basis, SMEs. So post-pandemic, more than ever, it was a critical situation, but some people managed to reinvent themselves, and many companies did that too. And that was super cool, and that's what bringing this return to the economy in our country. Right, Carol? You brought some examples, but I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Regina. Now we have a student that is famous in Canada selling his line of clothes now. About our students here at UNITER. We don't have much time, but could you give me one example of a entrepreneur or entrepreneurship that was born within the university? Our greatest case is Sims Card. We have Renault, Santander, they have startup competition. But for example, when I was at UNITER, I was part of the Renault experience. So I went to an auditorium, I talked about the project. We have people from political science to talk to me. Okay, there's a prejudice for someone who is a business administrator. But they came, they talked to me, and then Jen came and said, so what's your WhatsApp? Okay, well, my WhatsApp is my email. Okay, that's cool. 3 guys, actually 2 guys, Jean and another guy, Carlos and Miriam, and another guy from a different school. They created Sims Card, which was such a cool idea. So simple, but nobody had ever thought about that. We fixed their routes. It's a sensor that if you drink before you drive, the car stops. It's a huge social appeal, and they applied for this, submitted this project for Renault, and people said, okay, I wouldn't have this in my car because not that I'm gonna drink, but I don't know, how are you gonna define that? So they said, okay, let's focus in B2B, let's sell it to a company. I would be feel a lot safer if my Uber had that, if the truck I drive had that. If buses have that, because it kills a lot of people, truck drivers. They pivot this idea, the initial idea of a targeted business to individuals, and now they pivot to B2B. So they were awarded the Renault Awards, and those are international relations students. So, and they said, oh my God, these guys got a great idea. So we have, it's our greatest success case. So you're gonna go to Sanskar, you should try Sanskar, you're gonna see they did a revolution. And that's a great example, the first one that comes to mind. There are others, but very good. I do remember this example. Yeah, they were my students as well. That's so cool. Now, final question. We are almost running out of time, and when we need to have some time for our Q&A session. So we could see that to be an entrepreneur, you need dedication in terms of time, energy, resources, and we have many students that are entrepreneurs or those that want to be entrepreneurs. So what could you tell us? What would be the first steps to take? Could you give us some tips for those who want to start their business? Yeah, there's an ET that people are, it's a meme, a Brazilian meme. It's an ET, like an alien. I want to be an entrepreneur. That's my wish. I want to have my own business. First step, what am I going to do? Do I have the capabilities to be an entrepreneur? Because you need several competences, several skills. I want to act in this market. This market has opportunities today or in the future. Unique is a good example. In the past, people said, okay, how are you going to buy a satellite to provide remote classes? Yeah, that's what we did. And during the pandemic, the day after we started lockdown, I was working in my office. So events like this one will give you insights, but you need to understand the market you want to work with. What are your competitors, or what are your partners, or that could be your partners, or could be your competitors, to go after information where you live, to see if there's an eco-innovation system. We do have it here. And first step is it there? If it not, you can create. You can start as an entrepreneur looking for solutions for people like you. First step. Who else want to be entrepreneurs just like me? We know that you have the local taxes. So for you to work in this town, you need to pay 5% tax. And then you can go to City Hall and try to call for some incentives. That's a problem, especially with Brazilians. We expect things to fall from the sky on our laps. But no, we need to go after what we want. We shouldn't be afraid. I'm going to say, I'm not going to tell my idea to Bettina because she's going to steal my idea. Come on, if it was a good idea, it wouldn't be stolen. So you have to go after knowledge. You need to understand the logics behind the market. We don't know much about economics. We don't learn about that. There are things that I learned when I was doing my PhD. Need to go after knowledge. Economics is one example. Okay. Skill. It's a variable that we have to take into account, but we need to understand how all this works. So if you have an increase in gas prices, coal prices, so we need to understand issues in terms of international relationships. Maybe you're in Brazil and there's a solution in India. Oh, it's here. there are some things that are interesting that you can bring here in Canada. Bettina was here last week and she saw the difference. I saw the people, uh, the Bettina students at Ilha do Mel, it was below 30 in Canada. And people here, oh, what do people take from Brazil that we can adapt to our reality? Go after knowledge. People don't fall from the sky. You need to go after what you want. We have to get out of our comfort zone. And I think that would be my tip for our students. Professor Eliseu, thank you so much. It was excellent. We've learned so much from what we had to say. Now, I'm going to take this last few minutes to ask the question that we received from our chat box so we can interact with our students. And guys, I've selected some of the questions that you've sent. And let's do the following. I'm going to ask you to be patient. Be patient, and I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to ask both professors the question so that both can answer. So Professor Eliseu is going to start answering the question. He's going to answer in Portuguese. In the meantime, Professor Bettina is listening to the translation, and then she's going to answer her question in English. And you're going to have to be patient so that the translator can translate it to Portuguese. So please be patient. It's a few seconds delay, but we want to include everybody, okay? So we can have this important lecture in Saskatchewan, Canada, and Curitiba, Brazil, Paraná. So we want to have this international perspective in our roundtable. So be patient. Okay, first question. Question comes from Arquimedes Torres, and it's the following. What have been the most privileged areas in Canada and in Brazil for entrepreneurship as a challenge, okay? But let's forget about technology. Aside from technology, what has been the most privileged or successful area in Brazil and Canada? Professor Eliseu, okay. Aside from technology, oh my God, but in any case, simple solutions, I would say. You can have like food service. Everybody has to eat. Like the pandemic got us stuck at home, and companies selling food grew a lot. So I know places where it's cheaper to ask for a delivery service. So food's a very good area. So we need to have your own style. Hot dogs, popcorn. I need to understand how I'm gonna bring this passion to the client. There's a hot dog stand in Curitiba. They have a special bread. They have the recipe for the special bread. Nobody knows the recipe. Food is always a good area. And also entertainment. Entertainment, because those are areas where there's the experience. You eat something with, and entertainment. Professor Eliseu, Professor Bettina, could you tell us what do you think is the area, aside from technology, that is most in vogue or successful now?
Well, I would say that I agree with Eliseu that it is food-oriented businesses, right? Especially, since the pandemic, I've seen a lot of growth in food delivery service businesses as well, that skip the dishes, companies that are helping to meet that need for that came about really. It existed before the pandemic, but the pandemic drove more of a need for a lot of delivery services that just grew immensely here in Canada, whether it's grocery delivery services, restaurant delivery services. There's a lot of innovation there. I'd say certainly in Canada, you can't go wrong with businesses that help to deal with the cold weather and And so I mean, that's one example of how entrepreneurship can differ, right? I spoke about it earlier. You have resources, culture, but environment, of course, right? Your environment very much impacts the type of businesses and entrepreneurship that exists. So we see a lot of businesses throughout Canada that are really that are meeting a need when it comes to the incredibly cold weather that exists here.
Obrigada, professora Bettina. Vou passar então.
Thank you so much, Professor Bettina. Let's go to our next question. I'm going to have it in Portuguese. So, guys, be patient. Carolina is asking the following. First step to become an entrepreneur. Let's wait. Mentorship? What is more important? Mentorship, the financial issue, or the execution of the project? What would you say? To me, mentorship. I think that talking to someone about your idea is very important. The financial part is always important, but you can get into an agreement to have products where you pay what you sell. Like some areas, for example, bars that you receive the drinks and you pay as you sell. And the execution is very important. But mentorship, not because I'm a mentor, but when you want to be an entrepreneur, Plato said that love is a mistake. Okay. Plato used to say that. You are in love with the idea. And if you're in love with the idea, you cannot see from the outside. So the mentor can help you to show paths, what to follow. So talk about your idea, discuss your idea, and people can broaden your mind, or you can end up being frustrated because you're going to listen that's not a good idea. But talk to your friend, your partner, your father, your mother. Mentorship is very important because of that. You're going to show their perception, the perception of someone who's been in the market for a while. Thank you, Eliseo.
Mentoria ou a parte financeira?
Now a question to Professor Bettina. Mentorship or the financial part is more important. What is more important?
I agree with Eliseo. I absolutely think mentorship is the most critical. Many Indigenous entrepreneurs here have access to Indigenous financial institutions that provide financing. What I think is even more important than the financing is the business support services, the mentorship, right, that they receive from those institutions. I think, and it doesn't have to come from formal institutions mentorship. As Eliseo said, it can come from friends, it can come from colleagues. But I think that as an entrepreneur, you have to learn many aspects of the business. You might be very skilled in one area, but in order to be, I think, very successful, you need to really immerse yourself in learning the business as a whole, and so that mentorship piece is critical.
Obrigada, Bettina.
Thank you so much, Bettina. And my other question, I'm going to read the question from Marcia, but it's a question that we saw and that we received this question more than once. Okay, Marcia asks, to be an entrepreneur, is it necessary to have a market assessment based on the region you want to work with? What's the importance of
regional para poder empreender?
Like a regional analysis to be able to be an entrepreneur, to start your entrepreneurship. It's the first thing that I have to do. Even in Brazil, like I went to the Northeast, people don't drink wine in the Northeast. I think in Canada it may be more successful because you drink wine when it's colder. But I need to understand where I'm going to work. Who are the competitors? What are the personas? Initially, you have to do this analysis, do this assessment. You don't have to be passionate. We have the Brazilian agency that governmental agents with the statistics for the whole country, how many cities you have in a state, how many people in each city. So you have to go after the information. It's public information. What is the average per capita income of the region? Oh, if you get like a very expensive good, you're not going to say, okay, we don't almost went into bankruptcy. But you have to understand that the Louis Vuitton is Louis Vuitton. But anyway, you need to understand the geographic, the social data, cultural issues are very important. I think it's even more important than anything. Just a good, very clear example. In the south of Brazil, there's a beer called Polar that's only sold in this region. It's part of InBev, a multinational company, but people from this state love it so much that they don't want to sell it in different states. And you have a soft drink that's called Guaraná Jesus that's now getting into the rest of the country, but it's a very interesting flavor soft drink. Thank you, Eliseo. Professor Bettina.
I agree completely with Eliseo. The market, you have to know your market. You have to understand the needs of your market and who your market is and what, a number of different factors about that market in order to really, I think, be successful as an entrepreneur. So absolutely, you have to do your research. You have to do that market research and understand your target market if you really want to see your product or service be successful. So there's so many things we talked about today about that local, Eliseo mentioned it earlier, you got to localize your product, your service. You have to understand, in order to do that, you need to understand that market and what their needs are, what their specific circumstances are, and yeah, it's a key ingredient to success.
Vou fazer a última pergunta. A gente tem muitas no chat, eu vou juntar.
Final question. I have many questions here, but I'm trying to put together all of them. Bettina tried Guaraná when she was in Brazil, and the students of First Nations who were here with us, they tried Guaraná, and it was a success. A student here in Canada, he said, I would like to drink a Guaraná right now. It was a huge success. My final question, I'm going to put together Bill Fonte's question with Fabio's question. Bill said, what are the great difficulties of entrepreneurship in Canada? And I'm going to talk to Fabio as well, because we have only 1 minute. I'm going to talk about a topic that it's complicated, taxes. In Brazil, you have to pay different taxes, and it's hard to compete with products coming from China, for example. I know it's a question, but how do you
dificuldade para os empreendedores?
Eu acho que incentivo, Carol, sabe? Impulso, diferenciada o pensamento.
I think incentives. The mindset is, the government mindset is not this. Taxes is a palliative solution. Incentives, many cities have incentives. Here in Curitiba, we do work with incentives. So incentive is very important, and try to emancipate people to understand that they have their rights. You have the popcorn sellers. They can create a union of popcorn sellers. We need to build something. Oh, he sells popcorn. Okay, let's go with our Congress people and think about the other side. I mean, in legal classes, we talk about taxes all the time. And you have to be free to go after what you need. So people need to be organized. Being an entrepreneur in Brazil is very difficult. I really admire you people because it's a dream. And the dream is more complicated than you our thoughts. So thank you, Eliseo. Professor Bettina.
So taxes in Canada, but specifically amongst First Nations entrepreneurs, there are some incentives for First Nations entrepreneurs who live on reserve in Canada. And so if you live on reserve and operate your business on reserve, you do not have to pay personal income tax on your business. That is something that is very much an incentive for many First Nations entrepreneurs to operate on reserves. So that's something that I think helps to generate that incentive there. It helps to generate business creation, more and more business creation on reserve. So we're seeing a lot of First Nations entrepreneurs opening up their businesses on urban reserves in Saskatchewan. So there are reserves that are being established in city areas, and because of that tax incentive, you see a real draw to urban reserves because of that tax incentive. So taxation incentives can play a real they can play a big role in creating more businesses in First Nations communities and on Indigenous reserves.
Agora sim, muito obrigada, professora.
Very good. Thank you so much, professors, for being here today, for accepting this invitation, sharing your knowledge. I'm sure that together with all the students, we've learned a lot. And now you're going to have our cultural time. You're going to invite Professor Flor to present this cultural part of our event. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again to present part of our culture. I'm Flor Pimentel, and I'm a music professor. Today I brought an awesome interpretation of a traditional work. Bacaroli or bacarola means small boat. Is a traditional song sang by gondola pilots, the gondola drivers, and it means beauty night, and it's Beijar Offenbach. Let's listen to sopranos Melissa Tomber. She's a student here at Nancy Nascimento.
Oh, belle nuit d'amour. Surreados em França, vida, amor, vida, amor.
Que delícia de interpretação, parabéns a Nancy, a Melissa. E olha só, amanhã eu estou aqui mais uma vez para apresentar mais um momento cultural para vocês. Até amanhã, um abraço e bom Global Meeting para todos nós.
Bom, pessoal, eu gostaria de agradecer aos nossos palestrantes hoje. Com certeza foi excelente, a gente aprendeu muito. E também quero agradecer a todos vocês que nos assistiram, que estiveram aqui conosco, se interessaram, escreveram no chat.
I'd like to thank you, our speakers, all of our participants. We like to thank you so much. Don't forget that tomorrow we have one more global meeting webinar with topics related to the SDGs. So, as always, we like to wish you all, our students,
Até mais. Tchau.
enjoy your study.